Bezos or others who have talked about look for the biggest problem you can solve, and as a result see the biggest returns. I knew we were tackling a huge problem. Figuring out where to enter was not easy. When it boils down to, hey, we're a subscription platform much like AARP or AAA for the immigrant market, sounds pretty simple. But when you're talking about actually a future where, as a result of understanding your profile and your stage of acculturation, I can connect you to the most optimal set of services that help you and your family succeed, that could be complicated. Technology and data is at a place in society where these sorts of solutions can and should exist. I think we just need more entrepreneurs, brains, capital pointed at solving these big issues in the world.
All right, welcome to the tech scenes. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's been a long time in the making here. We could have done this a long time ago. I'm glad we're doing it.
All right, well, let's start from the top. For people that don't know, tell me and everybody else about Welcome Tech.
Welcome Tech is building the future of immigration. If you think of countries the same way you think of companies, you would want to not only recruit great talent, but be able to onboard and integrate that talent. And it's shocking to believe that we're in 2025 and we've never had a digital Ellis Island. We've never had an operating system for immigrants. And so Welcome Tech is using technology and data to connect our immigrant community members to the critical information and services they need to be successful here. And when you consider that, you know, our mission is really about building a superpower for our nation, you know, and hopefully the model that can scale globally to other countries as well, because you really don't see a solution like this anywhere where, you know, most of the immigrant experience is left to chance, sink or swim, right? You know, figure it out as you go. And that's really craziness if you consider how much this demographic contributes to our GDP as a nation. The idea that we leave the success to this critical community to chance is we think craziness, and ultimately what inspires us is this idea that we can use data and technology to build a stronger nation and certainly empower immigrant households. So fundamentally, we've built a subscription platform that allows the immigrant consumer to access critical services at lower cost and higher quality, similar to an Amazon Prime or Costco model.
Right. And like, where did the idea of creating a digital Ellis Island come from? Like, no one's done this. You're the first one to attempt this.
It's been a bit of a random journey. You know, I went to medical school after undergrad, thinking that I was going to be a doctor. Fell in love with this concept of social entrepreneurism. Ended up starting an initial company that led to eventually starting an educational media platform. Prior to Welcome Tech, we had SABEResPODER, which means knowledge is power in Spanish. And we provided all the educational media in the waiting rooms of consulates and embassies in the US. Mm-hmm. So we had digital screens and print distribution, and we were monetizing that largely through ad revenue and sponsorship revenue. And so it put us between both the community members who were desperately trying to connect to products and services that were critical to their lives, as well as on the other side, brands and advertisers and service providers who were generally just horrible at reaching this demographic.
Right. So
you came to realize that one, there was this huge gap in the market, and two, that you know, the primary issue tended to be cost of acquisition, meaning that service providers, industries, brand categories really struggled to reach this demographic effectively. And as a result of that cost, you know, you'd see higher prices, higher fees, higher interest rates, all sorts of horrible experiences
that are passed along to those.
That's right, passed along to the consumer because of that lack of efficiency in the economics. And so realizing that we could actually power this in a much bigger way than the educational media that we were building led to Welcome Tech. So I've been on this journey around immigration and building systems and sort of impact for almost 20 years now, and don't know that I would have expected myself to be one of the world's most knowledgeable people around immigration and immigration systems.
Is that funny how that happens?
It is funny because just generally had an interest in building a career around certainly living quality life, but making an impact as well.
And you guys primarily initially started or are focused on the Hispanic community, is that right?
Yeah, well, people will note that about us, but I think the important takeaway is that the largest immigrant population in the world is the Hispanic immigrant population in the U.S. So if you're building a platform for immigrants in the U.S. in particular, you really need to start there in terms of the scale and economics that result in the ability to, contribute these services and resources to other domestic immigrant populations, as well as taking things globally. So arguably it's the right strategy to kind of win the largest scale and win the largest amount of data that can enable more impact and larger scale.
So the idea is to go with the larger piece of the pie at first to understand that before you branch into these other.
You've got to win there first. But I would also say, there's something beautiful about the interdependency of society, in that, by solving this problem for this segment of society, ultimately we have the leverage, the data, the economics to be able to make impact in other demographics. And we're seeing that play out already. As you know, we not only reach community members and households directly, but we've started to work with larger enterprise players and reseller channels. And what's happening there is that our products and services are extremely impactful for lower wage hourly workers across the U.S. For a variety of demographics. And so, big part of our vision from day one was that by focusing our lens on immigrant families, immigrant households, we'd be able to make impact on society as a whole. And then maybe further than that, the dirty little secret that people seem to forget at times is that we're all immigrants here in the U.S. So, we do see that, the relevance of delivering great services at high quality, low cost, turns out that impacts a lot of people, but certainly we've got our focus on the immigrant demographic, and specifically the Hispanic immigrant demographic initially.
These immigrant families are the biggest challenges that they face coming to the U.S. and how are you guys solving those?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, we see what we're building as sort of a catalyst to a term called acculturation. Some people will say integration or assimilation. But the idea being that if you've got a family that is new to the country, or frankly has been here for a decade or more, but still struggling to navigate effectively, you want to bring them into the system. You want them to be participants in society and really active and positive contributors to society. Because what you and I care about most is that our neighbors, our communities are safe, and that the folks are productively contributing in a way that makes us all stronger. And so bottom line is that we focus on services and industries that we know are foundational to their success. So when you look at the hierarchy of needs of our immigrant communities in the U.S., it really is healthcare, financial services, telecom and technology, access to education, as well as systems that are very specific to the U.S. In every country across the globe, you may not realize it, but they have very custom industries in their nations. And so in our country, our legal system, our utility system, our voting system is very unique to our country. And so it's important that we educate the members of our society around how to navigate those.
Right.
We kind of take it for granted, for those of us who grew up here or, lived our lives here, that we are supposed to understand the tax system or supposed to understand the insurance system.
Right.
These are pretty complex systems even for you and I.
Right. Most people don't know those.
Right.
Anyways. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
And you guys are reaching millions of people per year. What have you learned in terms of building products for this group at scale?
Yeah. So we reach, over 9 million community members a year nationwide. We have over 4.5 million actual members that we interact with on a regular basis. And we've been doing this for, as I mentioned, almost 20 years between our last company and this one. And I think really meeting people where they are, and also understanding that platinum rule, as we like to call it, and the golden rule, where treat people the way you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. And so putting yourself in the shoes of the consumer and understanding sort of how they want to access and gain access to these systems is really critical, because this is a community that generally has been asked to press 2 while they're calling in to get a service of some sort.
Right.
So they're already being told that they're second classes in this service that they're accessing, and nobody wants to feel that way. And so helping them feel that systems have been built from ground up for them, that services are being attentive to their needs, that the data that is needed is actually available in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
These sorts of things, become a lot more important. And then, of course, you're in the U.S. dealing with, the immigrant population, which is a mixed bag of, largely documented, largely legal population, but also a percentage that is undocumented. And so, you really, as a platform for immigrants, what you're thinking about is, how do I service those who are here?
Right.
How do I make sure that we have active participants contributing to society in a positive way? And certainly, government security needs to be there to ensure everything from our borders are safe and our policies are strong, so that we can win as a nation. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to.
It's complex. This is a complex business. Did you think it was going to be so complex when you first got into it?
I knew we were tackling a huge problem, and sometimes you'll hear, I don't know if it was Bezos or others who have talked about, look for the biggest problem you can solve for,
right,
and as a result see the biggest returns. Yeah, I think figuring out where to enter this problem and start tackling the issues was not easy. I think when it boils down to, hey, we're a subscription platform for the immigrant market, we are able to deliver high quality services at a low cost. If you're part of our membership platform, much like AARP or AAA or other affinity programs, sounds pretty simple. But when you're talking about actually a future where, as a result of understanding your profile and your stage of acculturation, I can connect you to the most optimal set of services that help you and your family succeed, that could be complicated.
Right.
But we're making our way, and the key point to make, I think, is, technology and data is at a place in society where these sorts of solutions can and should exist.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just need more entrepreneurs and more brains and more capital pointed at solving these big issues in the world.
Yeah. How are you guys using data and insights, analytics to help navigate the product and service?
Yeah, I mean, the generic answer is data is everywhere in our business, but I think a lot of people questioned the idea that this population would be comfortable sharing data. And by the way, not only has it been critical to have that data to be able to provide services and products effectively, but also just to debunk narratives that exist around this around this audience. Some of the narratives you may have heard in the past are, oh, this audience, doesn't like to use bank accounts or debit and credit cards. They only want to pay cash. And when you dug into the data, what you realized was that no, actually, this audience, this community and consumer segment, just doesn't like to get ripped off, just like anybody else.
Right.
They don't want you feeing the heck out of them. They don't want you taking advantage of them. They don't want you taking their hard-earned money. And so if you can respect that, they're more than happy to open a bank account, right, or access your financial services. Similarly, there was a big narrative around, this is not an audience that likes to share data. And when you actually spend time with this community, what they'll say is, Jeff, we provide data all the time. We go to a gas station, we make a payment, we give data. We go to a grocery store, we give payment, we give data. We cash a check, we give data. You give me value, I will give you data. And again, something that was misunderstood by a lot of industries and categories. So data has been really critical, how we've approached gathering data from our community members. It's been really critical, and it really informs everything from the experiences we create, the approach we take, the modes in which we connect to the consumer, the way we shape our products and the communication around those products. It's all built in. And the best example I can give you is, today we deliver about 5 million SMS messages or text messages a week.
Wow.
And in the early days, as we were building the company, we got a lot of flack, especially from those in the venture community and the tech community, about, why don't you build an app? You need an app. You need an app. And we have an app today, but we built a lot of our earliest audience into the millions with SMS.
Right.
And it was while getting a lot of pushback and, dare I say, like, pressure from investors, capital markets, that thought, we should make that move. And meanwhile, here we are today with the lowest cost of acquisition in the market around this demographic, really in the history of this market, and everybody else is trying to figure out how to access them. And,
right.
and we just listened. We just looked at what folks were comfortable with, and there was a time, it's changing a lot, but still a much higher engagement with SMS. There was a time where smartphones were a little bit harder to access. There was a time where smartphones were a little bit more complicated, and so we listened, and I think that's critical. You're not always building for yourself. You might be building for a community that you need to understand at a deeper level, and you've got to have the data infrastructure in place to be able to stay connected. Because it's
right.
easy as an entrepreneur, especially as you scale, to get stuck in an ivory tower and not really be connected to your community or your consumers anymore. And if you don't early on invest in having that data piece in place and those feedback loops, it can be detrimental to the long term as you're scaling the business and scaling the team.
Right. What was one belief you had early on in the business that later you learned wasn't true or was wrong?
Some of which have to do with sort of evolving and shifting markets and sort of how to respond to those markets, and others that have to do with a view on our customer or the community that we serve, and that view changing. And so you heard me say that early on we started with SMS. We've now evolved where we have additional channels, including an app. But I think maybe what stands out in my mind is, because of our last company, we had built a brand and a experience all in Spanish, to the point where we believe that the Spanish language brand was critical to building an authentic relationship with the consumer segment. And while I would tell you that there's still a significant population where that is true, it has become less the case and more evident to us that having an aspirational brand is actually very strong and resonates with the community that we serve today, giving folks an understanding that we want to be a partner in taking them to a better, stronger, safer, more successful place is really powerful.
Yeah. With that kind of like purpose-driven business that's highly complex, doing something as nobody's done before, like, how do you keep your team like aligned and focused?
Mission is a really powerful thing, and I think there was a time, especially early in my career, before social entrepreneurism or mission-oriented founders was a thing. People felt that was mostly reserved for nonprofits and was more of a burden than an advantage. And I think related to the focus question, I could tell you more tactical things that we do, whether it's building OKRs, as you know, or having a defined roadmap, etc. From a mission standpoint, as you're reacting to the market or making moves, etc., staying anchored in that mission, and then using that mission as a filter as well, on all fronts, whether it be like attracting phenomenal talent that actually is very motivated around that mission,
Right.
Whether it's avoiding investors who don't care about that mission, or whether it's making decisions on trade-offs on when to prioritize profits versus when to prioritize impact. Having a very strong mission orientation is a powerful way to create that focus.
Yeah, I think having that why and understanding your why allows you to have that filter that keeps bringing you back to why you're doing it and what you should do based on that, right?
It does, yeah. And then I also don't want to understate like the importance of leadership that's obsessed with getting to a win.
Right.
Because that can keep the train moving pretty significantly.
What do you think isn't talked about enough, like in this world of venture-backed technology companies within this space? Like, the common things are always talked about. Like, there's something to you that you think is kind of missed or people aren't willing to talk about?
I think there's a few things. I think like a statement that I've made to you before is that I just generally have a view that there is a lot of brain power and capital wasted on nonsense and not enough attention on solving real problems in the world.
Right.
And, it's not talked about enough. And it's not like, sadly, there isn't enough problems in the world that we all want to see get solved.
Right.
And so I really think more noise around the fact that capital is going towards a lot of stuff that is nonsense or sadly creates pollution versus actually creating solutions. And so I've got, a real issue with that myself.
Yep.
I think the other thing is, not every business is built for venture capital. And not every strategy is built for venture capital, nor should it be. But, we've just gone through a pretty wild set of swings in the economy. We have seen COVID happen, and it's all kind of resulted in some unusual outcomes in the capital markets.
Yep.
And when capital was flooding the system, a lot of businesses that weren't built for the venture journey received funding, and then it became a surprise to everybody why they were struggling. And so I think something that's not talked enough about is really being clear on your business model and your vision and why it's built for the venture journey, which is a very specific journey.
Right.
Versus building a great, phenomenal business that doesn't require venture capital, and maybe other sources of capital make more sense, or no capital at all.
Right.
And so it's just not something that's talked about enough. And here we are in a time in the world where I would claim there is a need for a lot of companies to go through a cleansing and through perhaps even a reevaluation, and in some cases a full recapitalization to reset, given a lot of what's happened in the market historically, and given that this attention wasn't given to this idea that not every company is built for venture.
Right. But I think of it really macro sometimes, of like, it's all about capital efficiency, putting the capital in the right places. So at the very big macro view of like making sure that we take this money and put it to the companies that are actually going to make the biggest difference, solve the biggest problems. And then once those companies get it, that's kind of where I come in, is to help them get aligned around where they want to invest in, because you only have so much energy and you only have so much capital, right, at the end of the day on this timeline that we're on. And I think it's really about like trying to define what's most important as a company and where you're going to go, and then as we bring it down from like what we do together, from the vision to the 3-year vision to the 1-year plan to the next 90 days, it's all about where are we making our bets? Where do we want to put money in places to learn and to like always be moving forward? And I think like what you're saying is there's a lot of companies that ate up a lot of venture capital that should have probably never had that capital. And that capital could have gone to these other companies that maybe should have it or more worthy of having it.
Yeah, I think that evaluation of whether or not your company and the strategy of your company is set up such that you are achieving these types of, 100x, 1000x, 10,000x returns that are expected with the risk capital, which is venture capital, needs to be well thought out, needs to be, understood, because what you're saying aligns with this in that you're expected to deliver that 1000x return on this massive vision, like building the future of immigration, with relatively minimal capital. And you're talking to someone who's raised a good amount of capital, but I would still argue for the vision that we're trying to achieve, it's relatively small, and because of that, it's a forcing function around efficiency and efficiency of growth. And that's why the work we do together is really critical, because you got to make sure every hour, every day, every dollar is being spent against the right resource allocation.
Right. So getting into that a little bit, you guys are building on peak, and I think it was it Brian over at Crosscut that originally connected us?
It may have been, yeah, Brian Garrett.
Because I had done sessions for Crosscut themselves and some of their other portfolios, so I think that was the connection originally. What was it like before you guys used Peak, and what drew you to working with me and building the company that way?
Yeah, I think, one way to think about the pre-Peak work was that we were a smaller team. We, were able to communicate more regularly.
Right.
You're in a room together, coding or making decisions, and, you're getting that feedback real time and thinking through stuff. It wasn't as hard to maintain focus because of some of those early goals that we had achieved.
Right.
And while we would, create some general plans on sort of where we were headed, I don't think we ever were as intentional about every quarter and every year, since starting Peak. And you mentioned Crosscuts, who led our Series A, and Ryan Garrett, who has been on our board for some time, made the introduction. And I think it was because everybody sees the potential and scale and growth around the business, and it only means you need to professionalize and productize more of the business, including this process of building your objectives and key results.
Right.
And that's why applying yourself to a system and working with somebody who can kind of pull the most out of the team in that process is really critical.
Yeah, I think what I see over and over again is once you're beyond just a team and now it's become a team of teams, when it's just a team, you can be the system. But I think once it becomes a team of teams, you just can't be the system anymore.
Sure.
And does that resonate with you?
It does, yeah. I think that's exactly right. And maybe I would even consider describing it this way: is once you're scaling beyond the founders, once it's no longer about me doing everything and I'm bringing others in to scale off of,
right,
and delegate some of those things that in the earliest stages as a founder you're doing everything.
Yeah.
And as you get through more and more, you want to actually do what you do best and own things that only you can do.
Right.
And then scale that that other work to your team members who hopefully are better than you at those things. That's when, as you described it, like the system of systems is really critical, because you just need everybody to be totally in sync. And one way to do that is, as a founder, as a CEO, you're repeating the things that need to get done and where you're headed and everything people really need to understand. But really documenting and solidifying these OKRs is powerful to keep that alignment. Everybody rowing in the same direction, and rowing at the pace that's necessary to win.
I think Measurement What Matters is a great book. It really explains like why you should do OKRs, but I think it kind of misses the mark a little bit of how to do OKRs. And we do OKRs a little bit different. I think a little bit more practical, but I think so many teams struggle in doing OKRs, and they get OKR burnout, or there's some nuances they don't understand, and it's challenging. And then having different team members that are either good at setting them or bad at setting them and trying to level them up. But it seems like so many teams that I work with, when I first started working with them, really struggle with that. Were you guys using OKRs at all before Peak, or is that your first introduction to them?
I think so. I mean, I think we were trying to create our own goals, I would say,
right,
and the critical tasks to get to those goals. So not exactly an OKR system. We definitely tried various systems, but I think it's both the system as well as how it's delivered, as well as it's real commitment from the team and the leadership to apply themselves to a system. Right. We both know there's a lot of systems out there.
Yes. And every new team member you bring in has a new system for you to use, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I think, what we liked about Peak the most, and in particular working with you, was not every system is built for venture-backed companies, and not every moderator, coach, etc. is familiar with, the challenge that exists for venture-backed early-stage tech teams, and so we were excited by the fact that knowledge was a part of the system that was delivered to us, and that we didn't need to question, do we need to customize this further for the work that we're trying to do or for the journey that we're on?
Right.
And then of course, you're a charming guy, so makes it easy to work with you.
Well, I think flexibility in a system is really important, because not every single team's the same. There's other systems out there where they really try to scale, so they try to really force one way of doing it. But I think every team I interact with, we mainly use the system and get them to understand why every own's important before we maybe flex on something. But I think it is important to flex on things, because some businesses are just different, or their leadership team's different, or the way they view the world might be a little bit different. So I think it's important to be flexible, but that's a constant challenge of being flexible to empower people. I think even within a company, you have to be flexible and empower your people, but you also have to stay focused. And trying to find that balance is, I think, challenging. And I think it kind of changes as you scale. I think in the earlier days, it's easy to kind of all right, this is what we need to do. And then as you start to scale and have more people, it's you want to give that direction, give input, but then you want to let them be able to figure out how they're actually going to do that, I think. And have you found that in your experience, kind of trying to find that balance of flexibility and focus?
Yeah, I think what words come to mind as you're sharing that is committed but adaptive. So committed but adaptive.
Yeah.
Both from a leadership standpoint as well as honestly motivation to the team. You got to deliver a commitment to an execution plan that comes with confidence around your understanding of the opportunity. But there's these feedback loops that are going on constantly, and so also adapting effectively and efficiently to feedback that you're getting from the data, whether it be one of your team members sharing insights from their experience or actual data coming off of product use. These things can change the shape of what you are executing against, and play to win.
Yeah,
that's the way we think about it. Is I'm never trying to be right. I'm just always trying to win.
Exactly.
So I think
I think that's one thing that you and your co-founder Raul do very well, I think, and I see a lot of teams. But one of the things that you guys do really well is listen. I think you guys are always willing to sit there and listen to the team listen to the market, listen to your board. I think you guys do an amazing job of that. And yet holding firm where you think it's important. You know, I that balance is kind of the same thing that we're just talking about, but like I think that's kind of between the two of you is like your superpower of what's made you guys successful.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's important for people to note that, you know, data and quality of data matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I hear you say we listen well, what I hope that means is that we're willing to take that data in and consider it as we sort of triangulate around getting to the right answer.
Yeah.
But ultimately the decision falls on us, right? And I think where things can go wrong is, you know, anybody watching this should know that nobody else has the perfect answers. You know, nobody else is as obsessed with what they're doing as you are. And so I think, you know, a lot of times operators will get feedback from an investor or an advisor, somebody who's, you know, influential to their journey and to their company building, but honestly doesn't have a clue what they should be sharing. And
Right.
you know, we've had some phenomenal investors and advisors over the years and been able to gather really great input and certainly a lot of great resources. But we've been the one to make the decisions at the end of the day, and we need to be the ones to make the decisions. And so it's important people have the right balance around that.
Right. 2 last questions. What do you think Welcome Tech looks like 10 years out?
Wow, 10 years out.
Is that too far out? Do you want to bring it in a little?
Normally I'd say it feels, doesn't feel like too far out, but these days with the rate at which technology is advancing, the rate at which we're seeing AI move forward,
Yeah.
you know, 10 years from now, I see us as the official platform for immigrants, with tens of millions of community members on our platform and the ability to quickly assess the needs of a community member and connect them to the optimal set of services that they want, and to do that in a format that is best received. And so, you know, we're seeing a lot of movement with AI towards conversational interactions. And if you look back at our product videos, like, you know, even before we started Welcome Tech 8 years ago, 9 years ago, you know, still you'll see stuff that was talking to like this need for a conversational interaction, this need of being able to leverage community data to provide better solutions. And it's pretty exciting to see what's coming through with AI right now and how we can deliver the vision that we have at a faster pace and lower costs and in multiple languages in a bigger way than we ever imagined. And so, yeah, 10 years from now, I'd imagine we're a resource available to all folks who are making a life in a new country, and that as a result, that country is a stronger place for having that system in place.
All right. So this is the final question. All the stuff we talked about was easy, super easy. This is the final question. So probably the most important question you've ever been asked in your life. And I'm glad you're sitting down so you're ready for this. And it's more of a scenario, I guess. It's more of a scenario than it is actually a straight question. But the scenario is this. You are trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. Now, you have food, you have water, you have all the things that you actually need to survive. Maybe even have health care, and you have everything that you want. The one thing that you don't have, though, is entertainment. You have absolutely no entertainment on this island, and you're there the rest of your life. But luckily for you, that 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. But you can only bring one album to listen to the rest of your life. What are you going to bring? It doesn't have to be 80s, even though it's 80s boombox. It could be any genre.
You're dating yourself by asking me to pick an album, by the way, with like all the ways that we
listen to
get
music now.
digital music,
Well, I mean, this drifted ashore, so
Yeah,
you're right.
right.
You don't have.
Right.
I guess you don't have Wi-Fi. That's one of the things you don't probably have.
I've got Michael Jackson, Elvis, and Led Zeppelin all in my head at the same time. But maybe if I had to pick one just to keep it upbeat and dance it out every once in a while. Okay, I'll give you an artist because I can't think of the album names. But I really enjoy my Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
I think there's a magic to that music that gets me pumped up, gets me thoughtful, helps me innovate. I have some cool stories about meeting members of the band and also
No way.
their song, which we use at the beginning of every one of our board meetings, which is the Immigrant song. And so really think that would be one to have with me.
Well, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. And you actually met some of the members?
I met Robert Plant on a Southwest flight back from San Francisco to LA.
No way.
And he shared with me that he wrote the Immigrant song, which he claimed for us. And then we got a fun picture together on the way back to the car. And he was a very kind person, and also found it really cool that guy with all the success that he's had was taking a Southwest flight.
Yeah, that's cool.
Was the guy I ended up sitting next to.
That's so cool. All right, so the final answer is Led Zeppelin.
That's right.
All right, awesome. All right, well, thanks for joining me on the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah.